Self-leadership, I think for me, started at a very young age. Young people aspiring for political leadership, there's nothing wrong with that. Have I had an identity crisis? Of course. I really know who I am in the sense that my self-worth or value of who I am cannot be dictated by someone else. I already know that.
Me as a person, I'm predicting that frontline leadership, people wanting to stay in the frontline spaces is what is going to happen. But how about you? Welcome to the Top VIPs podcast. My name is Comfort Muruhura and I'm honored to have been joined by an incredible, remarkable figure when it comes to leadership in Uganda, East Africa, Africa and beyond. This is a gentleman, one of those VIPs that gives us an opportunity to call him by his name, not, sir, not, Mr., not, boss. And Awel Uwihanganye, welcome to the Top VIPs podcast.
Thank you so much, Comfort. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm a VIP, so I'm going to enjoy it for as long as I'm here. So thank you so much for hosting me.
You're welcome. So when I had just joined Leo Africa Institute, you used to, every time we would meet, you would ask me, what do you want to do with your law degree?
Yes.
And I would make my submissions and I would see that there is a lot of, basic life, like wanting to do law, practice law and all that, which didn't really show that there was a bigger mission at that time. But I now have your answer. But, at that time, I think my submissions, you would see and you be like, maybe this gentleman is going through like identity crisis.
Right.
So if we are to go back to that day, what came into your mind that you saw yourself going to be identified with only leadership and any other thing, but it has to be like strictly about leadership? And did you ever really go through identity crisis?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such a great pleasure to have a conversation with you. I think we've wanted to do this for a while.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy that we find time to do it.
Yeah.
I think going to your question, first of all, that we're very incredibly lucky that we put out a call to have associate fellows to join the Leo Africa Institute, and you responded and some of your friends. So it's been an incredible journey working with younger people, because we've been usually bringing on, into their fellowships, people who are already in their mid-careers and that sort of thing. So I think being able to work with you guys as younger people has been an incredible insight into what the needs are for younger people in terms of mindset shaping and leadership aspirations, and in many ways has now helped us expand on our program in terms of how we see young people and how we want to engage with young people. But back to your question, I think it's not really that clear in terms of you're very clear that this is exactly what I want to do. I think along the way you continuously do work. For me, I think it's doing work that I feel that it's purposeful. I think when you're intentioned on doing work that has meaning, that impacts people, that fulfills you as a person, sort of will lead you then to eventually where you need to be really doing eventually. And I think ending up establishing the Leo Africa Institute was a culmination of so many different initiatives I had been involved in since I was relatively young myself. But I think what was consistent into all the things that I did was community, young people, giving young people a voice, building a platform for young people, but most importantly, service, the element of serving society. And I think that for me, that's at the core of everything, that we aspire to lead. If you aspire to lead and aspire to be a person of influence, of significance, I think the element of service has to be at the center. So I think, have I had an identity crisis? Of course. I think a lot of, when you're growing up, you can't escape that process of going through places when you're not sure of yourself, or even second guessing yourself and second guessing your ideas. So that happens. But I think when you're consistent and you're resilient, then you eventually find your footing. So I always asked you that question, what are you going to do with your degree? Because you're multi-talented, and you think you have a very creative mind. And here you are producing podcasts as you are a law student. So I was always like a bit concerned in terms of, I was always hoping that your passions won't be trampled on by either your pursuit of just law, that you have, the courage and interest to pursue the other passions that you have. And I'm glad you've continued to produce a podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I now get the perspective of why you were asking me that question.
Right.
So as you have said that, through doing different things, community service and all that, that means that at a particular point, you were doing all that, but then you had to reach an extent and you're like, but I think I can't do this when I don't have like self-leadership. So take me back to your journey as you were trying to work on your self-leadership, dealing with your self-awareness, dealing with doubt, dealing with uncertainty in life, and building discipline before you bring in other people to lead them.
Wow. So that's a long conversation we can have, because it goes way back into my childhood and how I grew up. And I think self-leadership, I think for me, started at a very young age. So sometimes you can aspire to lead, which I think is a privilege, that you can just feel like you're aspiring to lead. But sometimes you're forced into self-leadership. Circumstances can force you into where you have to find discipline. You have to be disciplined as a way of surviving through life and finding your way through life. And I think for me, whereas at the core of who I am as a person, I'm a service-oriented person, I'm public-spirited, but the sort of discipline and focus and attention to things that are of value, of who I want to become, or I should become, or being able to notice opportunity and be able to do something with it, came with adversity. So a whole lot of adversity that happened to me when I was still quite young. I wasn't even a teen. I was like 12 years old or 11 years old when my parents...
That was so early.
It was so early in life. If anybody has experienced like family breakup and what happens, and sometimes it's not always very pleasant. And for our case, it was not pleasant at all. So between that and through my teen years, going through situations where you barely have where to live or what to eat, so where you can't go to school because you don't have school fees. And then, but you already had a glimpse into the world in terms of what it can offer. And I think for me, what saved me was reading. I could read everything that I came across. So whether it was a magazine, a newspaper, old newspapers, and I always tell the story of how my late brother had an atlas, a geographical atlas. So this atlas had photos of different parts of the world and cities of the world, like London and Melbourne in Australia. I remember those very well. Or New York and Japan, in Tokyo in Japan. So all this, this atlas for me became like it was an imagination. To escape what I was going through, it created an imagination for me to live in these places, to travel to these places, to aspire to want to be in these places. And that became my escape. But my escape also eventually became my reality. So I think, how did I navigate through self-leadership, discipline? I learned from earlier on that I had to be disciplined to be able to make it through, to have an opportunity. To be of character was an important thing for me. I don't know how I got to know about that, but it was reinforced by feedback I would get from my mom or from other people who would say, oh, he's such a good boy, or he's well disciplined. So what I realized was self-discipline was reinforced by feedback I would get. And that really formed who I am and my character. And in a way, if you ask me, the one thing that made me go through either different challenges or persevered through what was really difficult growing up and eventually trying to get my way through life was discipline. Being of character And to be of character, you must be aware of certain values that you must have. So you must be honest. You must be a good person. You must be, hardworking. You have to be. There are so many elements of being of good character that one has to have. And if you are a teenager or a young person, I can see how difficult it can be to go through life to be of discipline, because there are so many things that are tempting you to be of good character. So for me, that's self leadership started from there, and eventually that's how I ended up like reinforcing my own sense of who I am.
Is that self-value? It's agachiro that you tend to use at most of the Leo Africa talks and engagement.
Actually, that's a very good point you're raising. So I think this element, I've talked about the agachiro, which is a Kinyarwanda word that really means self-worth, identity, and knowing who you are. So I had no word for it. But I think for me, again, the common thing that runs through my life, my common thread, is that I really know who I am, in the sense that my self-worth or value of who I am cannot be dictated by someone else. I already know that. And I'm not sure how that happened, like I said. But I think, like I mentioned to you, it must have been reinforced from feedback I was getting when I was young, because I was a good student, I was a good boy, I was well behaved. And because I understood my problems, or the problems that were surrounding me, I knew that I couldn't afford to, I don't know how I knew that, but I knew I couldn't be indisciplined. Otherwise, I would not be here if that had been the case. So I didn't have a word for it. This sense of self, to be aware of who you are. And it's not very common that someone would come from like very difficult backgrounds and struggle through life and still really remain holding on to that one thing. And that's what's called agachiro. So I found out a word for it, that in Kinyarwanda it's called agachiro, a sense of self, a sense of value and self-worthiness, which can only be defined by you. No one can determine that. And so regardless of what you go through and what you have or what you don't have, the one thing that you can never lose is agachiro, your sense of self. Yeah, so I think, and for leaders, I think that's a very important ingredient, because leaders who are not aware, who are not self-aware, can be very dangerous leaders, because then they can project whatever
they have within.
Yeah, but whatever negative things they carry along or confusion they carry along. So I think for self-awareness is an important ingredient to being a good leader, I think.
Nice. And there was a time when I was on your LinkedIn profile, and I saw one of the readings that also struck my heart.
Right.
It was a life lesson that you had put, that when you do good, when you create value, when you innovate, when you try to contribute something towards the society,
right,
a lot of opportunities, accolades, and many other things follow.
Right.
Did this life lesson come to you at a point where you were transitioning from self-leadership to now seeing that now it's not about me, it's about other people doing good to society and not just about you?
So it's interesting. So you were checking me out and you're stalking me. That is something I believe so profoundly, that I think because otherwise there's no way of explaining my life story. I think I commonly tell friends of mine or people who know me that I'm one of the luckiest people that I know. But I've also had to go through the most incredibly tragic and painful things that no one should go through. So the contrast, I think, of these two worlds, of being able to know what it means so the gratitude I carry in my heart is not just informed by the things I have or the things I've gotten, opportunities I've gotten. I think it's informed by also knowing what it means to lose something, to lose someone, to lose people, or to experience loss in the most tragic way. And I think it's part of the story, of the recent loss of my nephew, which happened in the most tragic. I mean, that was the latest. Every time you go through something like that, you always think nothing can happen that will open you up in a manner that leaves you so bare until something else happens. So I've had to go through like series of these really tragic, painful situations. But through those places, through those experiences, I think it's where we find God. I mean, I believe in God. So I think in those moments of tragedy, of pain, is actually where you find yourself. And so to ask yourself, how did I discover that transitioning is, like I said, how do you discover that is, I think, like I said, you can't just only have good things happening to you. There has to be, life happens. It continues to happen. So I'm grateful that regardless of everything that has happened to me, I've also had like the most incredible life. I remember I told you about these imaginations I had as a child. So these imaginations and dreams actually really became true. I went to all these, I lived in so many of these cities that I told you about. I've traveled to many of them. So I've really had success in many ways beyond what I ever imagined. And what
for yourself as a person.
As a person. And to answer your question, I think the first important achievement was myself, building myself, creating opportunity for myself. And when you ask, how did I transition from self-leadership to community leadership or leading others, is, like I said, when you do good, the world has a way of responding. And when your intentions are always coming from the right place in your heart, again, because I'm very spiritual, I'm deeply spiritual, that I always think that God knows what's in our hearts. So when you desire something so deeply but then you mean well for others and for society, you will always get what you want. So when you always respond and act on your intuition, when you see someone in need, someone who needs an opportunity, because we are part of this world to give and to take, So what are you giving? And you can't always give just when it's convenient. So I've learned that through doing good is how my life has been saved, really. You know what I mean? So every act of kindness, every act of good, every act of service, every act of creating opportunity for other people has always meant like 100 times more coming back to me. Not that it's a give or take situation, but I can't explain like what the opportunities I've had. When you talk about accolades, some of the accolades I've had to get, all the recognition from heads of states, from others, I can't explain it. So it can only be as a result of my service, which is service to others. But also when you create, when you build things, when you innovate things that are of value, that create value, in a way, you will get feedback from society.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And now that, since we are now on the part of leading others, giving out more.
Yes.
If someone mentions leading people from the front or frontline leadership, what are some of the things that come into your mind?
Wow. So frontline leadership, first of all, is dangerous business. I have to tell you.
Also.
So I always have, again, conversations. I love these very intimate conversations with some of my friends. And so one of my friends, Hashim, whom you know, sits on our faculty. He's one of the faculty at Leo. We always talk about the difficulties of leadership and how leadership can be quite dangerous. And so leading others can be dangerous business because in many ways, managing people is difficult, but to lead means that you have, first of all, you have to have the authority to lead. So it can't just be that you have a title that allows you to lead. So the leadership we're talking about is where you have the moral authority to lead. So first of all, you must have that. And it has to be recognized, by those whom you're leading. Do you have a right to lead? It can't be just the title that puts you into leadership. So your moral authority to lead is one. But number two, your character. Are you leading? Do you have integrity? Do you have work ethic that people can look up to? What are the qualifications for leadership? So those are like many questions you have to ask yourself in terms, if you think you want to lead others, but also it's contested. Leadership can be contested. When you occupy space where somehow there's a privilege or recognition or a voice, someone is always going to want to occupy the same space that you're occupying. And sometimes that creates conflict. So leading from the front means that you have to deal with everything that comes with it. And part of it is the dangers of leading is when you get in the crosshairs of interests, or when you get the crosshairs of those who maybe want you to get out of the positions which you are in for them to get in. And just managing people in general is very, very complicated business. So to lead even just 3 people, let alone 10 or 20, you must have a moral right to lead. But also you must build there has to be some sort of inherent survival instincts and emotional intelligence that sort of allows you to know how to manage people in a way that keeps you safe and helps you achieve the goals that you've set to do.
That's great. And now that we have somehow defined what leading from the front is,
yes,
what could you say leading from the back? Because now you're talking about the dangers of frontline leadership.
Yes.
But how about leading people from the back? What could be the dangers? What could be the experiences of?
Absolutely. I am better at leading from the back. I actually enjoy that very much because, as you know, I'm invested in building leaders. I'm invested at the Leo Africa Institute and the work we do. And I think for me, what gives me so much joy is to see the people we work with, whether it's fellows or associates or even staff, continue to progress. I mean, that's really has defined my whole life work. My whole life work has meant that I've always had to work towards making sure that I'm creating opportunities for others to grow and thrive. And so working from the back is actually what I enjoy more, because then I'm not in the spot. I'm not distracted by the spotlight. I'm not influenced by the trappings of position. And I also take pleasure in supporting frontline leaders to succeed, because many of the frontline leaders tend to be very charismatic and very but maybe sometimes they lack certain strengths in managing. So you can lead, but managing is a different thing. So, and I think that's where my strengths are, in supporting leaders to manage systems, to thrive and to succeed. So I think for me, leading from the back is really what I would prefer. It's what I enjoy, because I take so much pleasure in seeing other people succeed. And being part of other people's stories in a way that I don't have to be the person in the spotlight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But for those two approaches,
yeah,
there is a role that trust plays.
Yes.
So what has it been like for you when it comes to participating in frontline leadership, like the role of trust in participating in frontline leadership? On the other hand, the role of trust when it comes to leading people from the behind? It's
a really good question. And I'm also like that you're using words like trust. And because a lot of people don't use those words anymore. You know, words like, trust or love or, commitment, hard work. These are the things that sort of like embody a person of good character, that you must be trustworthy. Someone has to be able to trust you, or people must trust you for you to lead well. So trust has everything to do with it, because it's incredible when you've built a certain levels of good character, when you're a person of good character and people trust you and they will speak for you when you're not. I think that's when you know you have achieved an elevated level of moral leadership. So moral leadership is that leadership which is not defined by position or title. Is where you lead because you have an authority to lead, And so what people say about you when you're not in the room is a result of trust. The trust you have built. Even when people say certain things about you, and they're like, no, that can't be so and so.
Yeah.
The person you're talking about is not someone real. Let's assume that is true. There must be a reason for that, So when people start even making excuses for you, or when a negative issue comes around because your name is mentioned in the room, then that's a result of trust. So when you build high levels of trust as a leader, it can take you so far because people trust you. And I think that is not a very easy thing to do. To build high levels of trust that allow you to exercise moral leadership over a community, for example. In this case, for example, I would say I like to assume that you trust me. I like to assume that most of the fellows in the Leo Africa Institute or within our community of faculty members or whatever trust me. Because otherwise, how can you lead a community like we have, where the element and the issue of values is at the center of really who we are as a community, as an institute. So that takes a high levels of trust to build over time. And that's, again, trust comes from how you conduct yourself, what you say and what you do can't be different things. And inherently, people must think that you mean well, even when you make mistakes.
Interesting. So on the part of like trust, on specifically where you're leading people from the back.
Yes.
How do you then, if in case there is a mistake of that has been made by someone you have been leading from the back, and now it has started to encroach on your reputation, how do you then build that, building from the mistakes that people that you are trying to put in order, that they commit? How do you build the reputation in case there is a mistake from
on
someone?
My part or
no,
on the
from
part of
someone that you are leading, that from behind?
So first of all, we all make mistakes, you know what I mean? And we have to extend each other grace in a certain way, in certain levels. And like I said, when you've built certain levels of moral leadership, people can always make excuses for you, even when you make a mistake. So not excuses, but allowance. They allow, you are allowed a certain, they can allow because they know that you're well-intentioned, but also you made a mistake. So second chances, so I think everybody deserves a benefit of doubt. Everybody deserves a second chance. I think none of us is perfect. But there's some honest mistakes, but there are also like really mistakes which have to be really thought through. You know what I mean? If mistakes really hurt or injure society, injure individuals within the community, I think one can look at it differently. But if it's a mistake that we all do, like in our course of every day, there's a whole process of how you can go about repairing that relationship. And this is, it happens in our families, it happens between our friends, it happens so there's a whole process that goes through to repair that. But if the mistake is injurious to an individual or society, then that has sanctions. There has to be certain levels of sanctions. But we do all make mistakes.
Yeah, interesting. And jumping from leading people from the front and leading people from the back, it has a lot to do with Leo Africa Institute, the institute that you founded in 2012. It's now coming to 14 years, 13 years, but coming to 14 years. And at that point where there is a story that you tell about how you came about when it comes to founding Leo Africa Institute, on how you had traveled, a friend had invited you in South Africa, and because of the good work you had done, that person gave you a check of $40,000 US dollar.
45 actually.
45.
Yeah.
USD, and it helped you financially to start the work that you are doing with Leo Africa. But as a person who had already participated in leadership, how do you think you would have done it if you didn't get that financial help and all that?
So like I said earlier, so I like telling that story, not because it's a great story, because it is a great story, that human beings can meet as strangers, but we can have each other's sense of purpose and intent, and there's that camaraderie and solidarity to see each other's dreams come true. So for me, my story with Magnus, who I always reference, who was a friend of, he's a friend of mine, a great friend of mine. And just through a conversation, I was in distress, I was in the middle of confusion, talking about losing one's way. I'd lost my way, I had no idea what was happening. I'd achieved what I thought was success, but then everything was falling apart. Dealing with betrayal, dealing with being let down, and all the things that I was telling you that come with being in leading from the front. One of the worst things to deal with is betrayal, to be betrayed by people you love and people you trust. So I was in a really, really bad place, and he got a sense of what was in my heart. So I think that, like I said, when you are well-intentioned and your heart is in the right place, and like I said, God knows what's in our hearts, and that power of intention, the power of awareness and of intent to do something good, is so people respond to that. People just don't respond to you as an individual, as Awel. So I think through my conversation with him, and you can imagine, I mean, Magnus was about like 45, I think, at the time. A 45-year-old man signing who 45,000 then was probably like $60,000 today. So you can imagine, what did it take? He didn't know me from Adam, didn't know. Why would he do something like that? And I think for me, I tell that story not because, like I said, it's a great story, because it's a great story of solidarity, of Africans being in solidarity with each other. But I tell it because I think it's the power of the spirit, the power of intention, and the power of ideas to be able to influence. So someone told me that people invest in people, they don't invest in businesses, because your idea can be so great, but if you're not, who is driving it, if you're not sellable, then the idea is not sellable. So I feel like Magnus was responding to a powerful force of intention and a powerful idea, which we know now is a powerful idea. And I think since then, so many incredible things like that have happened. And I'm deeply grateful. I think in many ways, that's how you experience, like I told you earlier, you experience these incredible human experiences that it's not always just tragic and bad and all that stuff. So being able to experience, like, especially experiencing the deeper sense of someone's goodness is just as powerful and impactful as experiencing treachery or betrayal from someone you love.
Yeah.
It leaves you with scars and whatever. But this can also heal you in a way that reassures you about the human condition and the human spirit and human intention. So you could say that my experience with Magnus, which resulted in building Leo, what it is, and we still continue to work to it. He continues to contribute money, and his time and his goodwill. And so we have this friendship of over 15 years, which in itself is something to sustain a friendship for all that time, that involves money, that involves working together, reputation, and all that stuff. Magnus is a much more accomplished man than I am, but he still sees value than to deal with. So it's an incredible friendship, which I'm grateful for.
That's interesting, because now as we jump into political leadership,
yes,
we are currently in the political period, and at the start of it, we saw a number of young people running to pick forms to register themselves to be like MPs, take on different political leadership positions. And most of them, the ones that I know, there are those that I know that had just finished university.
Right.
And to me, those people, yes, they had held like certain positions at the university level, but then now they are jumping into national level leadership.
Right.
Do you think a person who has just fresh graduate from university and has participated in university leadership is worth to, get to a national level leadership space?
Right. So I think, first of all, there's a place for passion. There are those who are really passionate about politics and who want to be involved. But I also feel like there's a place for mentorship, political mentorship. And also, I think the difference in the context of Uganda is that people think that going into politics is the most lucrative way to build wealth or to build to make money. I think that's something so disappointing. So you find that people will do anything and everything to get into political leadership. So the element of service is not there. That's what's disappointing, that a lot of people who aspire to lead today are not rooted in anything that is they're not rooted in strong ideas that are going to change society. There's no ideology you think that is so influential that they would speak and other people will listen and they will influence others. Unfortunately, we also don't have that many good role models in the political space that they can look up to and say, I want to be like this person, because they have sacrificed and they have done great and they have... So I think young people aspiring for political leadership, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's one way of learning, whether you make it or not. The difference is that also as young people, when they run and get into these positions, they take on this older mentality. So it's not like they are pushing a generational agenda, of saying, oh, no, I'm going to run, and when we do, as my generation, we're going to change things. And this is what we want to change. They just want to get into these positions and become the same people whom they are criticizing before. And that's really disappointing. So in that sense, I think it's a very disappointing thing.
Interesting, because now I was leading it to a position where you have to make a prediction on the two approaches.
Yeah.
When you look at the political leadership landscape, you get to see that people who are already in positions, they don't want to leave them. Me as a person, I'm predicting that frontline leadership, people wanting to stay in the frontline spaces is what is going to happen. The political leadership space. But how about you? What is your prediction on frontline leadership versus leading people from the back?
We don't have many people who want to lead from the back. Everybody wants to lead from the front, because I think there's this sort of clamor for honorable this and excellence this and that sort of thing. But like as I said, I think the issue of service, in a way, it's missing in our politics. It's missing in most people who work for the public sector. That's why we started Huduma, as a way of making sure at the core of the public service, at least we still have people who understand the core of service, that service is still at the core of occupying the space, the offices they occupy. So in that case, I think it's disappointing, like I said. We don't have many people who are leading from behind to support those political leaders to become better public servants and better leaders for society. And like I said, I think we have a big deficit of role models for younger people to aspire politics. The sort of people now you see, when you compare to those who inspired us to be politically passionate, and it's you can't blame young people who are trying to get into this, because that's what they see. So they will act on what they see. My hope is that we can have more programs like the Law Africa Institute, sort of like orient the sort of leaders who occupy politics to sort of be values-based, be rooted in goodness and intention to change society for the better, to serve, to be in solidarity with each other as a generation, and ultimately to be better versions of themselves. It's not that when they get in, they don't want to leave. I mean, if you're a good leader and you want to serve, but you have to be, it can't just be for your own sense of well-being and just your own benefit and stuff.
Nice. And we are coming to the conclusion of our episode, but then what would be like your message when it comes to young people who are currently struggling with when to lead from the front, when to lead from the back? They are just there today. They are in the front. They are not sure. The other time they are leading from the back. Those young people, what would be like your message when it comes to
So first of all, I would say that looking back on myself, I think I was not very patient with myself. My case was different because I really had to overcome so many Like I said, I dealt with things I think no 10, 12-year-old or even 16-year-old, 21-year-old should deal with, So I was coming from a different place. But I think there are also those who are struggling with things like that. But for those who really have the privilege to even to aspire to lead, I think to be patient with themselves, to learn more who they are, and to serve. First, engage. Even community service, you can volunteer, you can do work that may not be paid, but it's teaching you something. Find a good mentor, someone whom you think is honest, you can trust, that can give you honest feedback on different things. But also, there's nothing wrong with leading from the bar. You can create so much value out of that. I think the challenge is that even those who lead from the front don't know the value of those who lead from the back, to understand that they need good people to support them who lead from the back. So there's a whole dysfunction around the confusion around the politics and stuff. So, but finding your place in society and how you can add value is a process. So one can be patient with themselves, but you also have to put yourself out there. You have to try out things, get good mentors, get involved. Community, politics, support you, be involved. Eventually but also at the core of it, don't forget who you are. Like I told you, agatiro, when you know a sense of who you are, a sense of worthiness, no one can determine that for you. When you know that this is who you are, so you can't make me feel it. Of course, the world will always try to shame you or try to put you, for whatever reason, or make you feel like you're less. Or I have to tell you, Comfort, there's no way I would have made it through life had I allowed the world to define me through my circumstances I was going through. I never even for 1 second felt I wasn't what I was going through or what I was. All I knew was I was somebody, but I was in this circumstance, but I didn't allow it to define who I am or whatever. So when you protect that about you, your sense of self, sense of identity, and sense of worthiness, you will find that the world will start tilting towards you. People will come to you, and the rest of the things will come to you, because the world and people are looking for self-assured individuals to engage with, to invest in, and to have contact with. And so that's a lesson I've learned. That when you're self-assured, when you're not afraid to project yourself, when you don't allow yourself to be, to be reduced to something because of your circumstances, don't allow that.
So would it differ if I asked you about the leadership lesson that you have learned when you were young that has stuck with you till today?
I think
it could be
like I said,
a difference.
No, I said it earlier. I think to be of good character, it was to be of character paid off. I mean, like every time, like I would do something good, or I was just really being myself as a good child or as a good son, it was reinforced in how, my mother or people around me, the community, would sort of refer back to me. Oh, he's such a good person, or he's a good child. And so those sort of affirmations then reinforced who I really was. So if there's one lesson, was that to have integrity, to be honest, to just be a good person, to be a good character, that can actually carry you through so many things. So I learned that at a very young age, and it really carried me through so many. And I never even allowed myself to be in a position where, even when there was a confusion or a contradiction where my character was in question, and whenever I would do everything I can to correct that. If it was a contradiction or a misconception of, I couldn't allow, because the value of who you are is you. So my value is my integrity, my character, and a sense of who I am. And so those who have known me since I was young, or those who have known me for the last 20 years, or those who I've worked with, they would know who you are. So you can't say you're this person and then you're doing this sort of thing. So
that is interesting. It reflects more to the thread. Every time something goes wrong, you go back, and it's the thread that pushes you to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And in your last remarks, as we conclude, what are some of the mindset shifts that you would say that these and these, a person at least should go with them from our conversation today?
Wow. I think in summary, I would say you really must know who your champions are. If you're aspiring to lead, you must know who your champions are. You must find champions, because there are those who are going to champion you, people who believe in you, people who give you opportunity, open doors for you, encourage you. But you also must be aware of who I call dream snatchers. So these are people who sometimes are very you might think they are well-intentioned and they're around you and they're good people, but they take something away from you. So one of the things I've learned is most people, when you lead and you're passionate and you have ideas and you project yourself, it sometimes scares people, because most people never want to go beneath the surface of who they are, because the moment you open up a lead to look at what you're capable of doing and what your life can be, it means that you have a responsibility to work on those things, and it's hard work. So most people don't want to work hard to become the best selves they could become, so they suppress that. Now when you dare to open that lead, those who are afraid to do that want to make you feel like you need to. And so sometimes these dream snatchers will tend to bring doubt into what you're thinking, doubt into what you're doing, and sometimes sabotage you in ways that you can't even understand. So I call those dream snatchers. So just as much as you need champions to open doors for you, to prepare you, you must be aware of dream snatchers, because they can also take your soul. Because dream snatchers won't just take your dreams, because your dreams are your soul. So when your dreams are gone, your soul will be next, because they will not be satisfied. But they want, because you're very special. If you're a leader, a natural born leader, if you're a moral leader, if you're somebody who is going to scale and do great things, there's something special about you. And that sometimes scares others. And so those are the dream snatchers one must be aware of. It can't be all champions.
Interesting. I hope you have been able to learn quite a number of lessons that have shifted your mind, because this is a podcast that is meant to transform your mind. And in this very episode, I hope when it comes to leadership, you have been able to learn so many things, from self-leadership to leading from the front, from, the gaps that are in the political leadership space, to leading people from the back, and, life lessons that have been, that Awel has been able to share. And what would be your last remarks so that we conclude?
No, I'm just really happy that we got time. Sorry it took so long. I know you've been inviting me to, but I'm glad we finally made time. And so, thank you.
We are now gearing up for the annual leaders
Exactly, yeah. So for those who don't know, the annual leaders gathering is our annual event where the whole community around the Leo Africa Institute comes together, and our partners, fellows, faculty members, and we come back together to sort of reaffirm our commitment to service, to good leadership, but also most importantly to fellowship among ourselves. We have a community of over 250 fellows and faculty members, and so it's quite a solid community of leaders who are at the forefront of transforming society, institutions, and companies where they live. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you and the rest of the associates at the annual leaders gathering. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
See
you in another episode.